to be our discussion about LGBT's pride on our side. So what we have designed this to be is going to be like more of a panel discussion in which our two speakers are going to talk about certain topics relating to the LGBT community. Love wins, is pride on our side. Does it really win in Allah's eyes? So this discussion will educate the youth in respecting others' life choices while understanding what is and what is not permissible in Islam. So the opinions during this lecture, I just want to make clear that everyone has, kind of their own preconceived notions and our own beliefs, and I think everyone, I would like this to be like a more respectful space for everyone to be able to freely share their own opinions, and also listen to the opinions of our two speakers here. So we're going to look at that topic shortly, and I actually just want to introduce one of the speakers right here. So this is Brother Arif Kabir. So he holds a Bachelor of Science in Operations Management and Information Systems. He works as an IT professional in IBM Corp. He also memorized the entire Holy Quran in 2009, mashallah. In Ramadan, he led the Tarawih prayer in in Shady Grove. He also devotes his time to teach Quran in the Quran Institute, Darussalam in College Park, Maryland. All right. So if either of you have a preference in who starts first. Okay. All right.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to make you do it again, it's mandatory. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, we got a very lively crowd in here. Okay, the first thing I want to say is that I myself am very, very humbled to be here. Actually, when I saw the program and I saw Imam Shamsi speaking, I was like, I want to sit in the crowd because I have more to learn than to share, honestly. So I'm here more as a fellow student of yours. We're all the same age, and inshallah we're going to benefit a lot from him. What I may offer, inshallah, is perhaps some perspective or some of the things that my teachers have passed on to me. And from my understanding of the topic, this isn't so much more of a lecture as it is a discussion, as well as us to share some perhaps alternate viewpoints than what might be very common in the mainstream media, etc. Right? One of the discussion points, and a lot of these are just points for us to kind of mull on while we talk about our the points that we have, is number one, how do you view God in your life, and how do you view God in general? This is an important question, the answer of which will substantiate and will define the discussion that we are to have. For a lot of people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or God is somebody that they see as, perhaps removed from their lives. He is someone that set the world in motion and, left it as be. Whereas others see a more dynamic relationship and they see that God is very involved in our lives, etc. Based on that understanding of where you see God to be in your lives, the next question that comes is your level of trust in God, right? If you really believe that this universe wasn't created out of chance, that we all didn't just come out of nowhere, and that we all were created for a purpose, and that there is a Lord that deserves to be worshipped and a Lord that we do worship, what is the relationship that we should have with that Lord? And do we trust Him with the commandments that He gives us? Because if we really do say yes, that I consider myself a devout Muslim or a practicing Muslim, then in that same regard, what you're basically saying is, I consider that whatever Allah says is to be the final truth. And therefore, if the law of the land, for example, allows alcohol, but I understand from my scripture, I understand from the Quran that it isn't allowed, then I won't do it, right? Because I trust in Allah. And my laws of my religion weren't built upon voting to see what is allowed and what isn't, but rather it's built upon a more divine being, and the divine being being the one that gave us these divine laws. So that's the first point. The second point, and this is more of a cultural point, more so than political, which is how we look at a lot of topics around us. So from a very young age, we make a lot of things sound a lot more innocent than what it might be. So for example, and this is an older crowd, so we can be a little more frank. A lot of times when people talk about like sex or intercourse, for example, they'll try disguising by saying making love, right? And they'll talk about this, they'll be like, oh, those two people, they're just making love, right? And what does that mean? To if you, with a clear mind, you're like, oh, I wonder, they probably, get some cards out, they cut out some hearts, and they're like making love, or like they have some type of machine, and like beep, like love is being made or something, right? Or people go around and they're talking about lying, which is a grave offense in Islam, right? Hassan said, the one who lies is not among us. They say, oh, it's just a white lie, right? It's a pure lie, Like, what is a white lie? What's the opposite of white lie? Black lie? Like, that's racist, right? Like, what are you talking about, right? And they use these words, and we start defining our debate on those words. This is something very important to keep in mind, that sometimes someone might come to you and they say, hey, don't you believe in marriage equality? And as the topic of the program is, don't you believe in pride, in gay pride? Don't you believe that anyone should be allowed to love whoever they want? Shouldn't they be able to make love as they want, right? And you're kind of, what they're basically trying to do is say, are you for rights? Are you for equal rights, or are you against equal rights? Or are you for pride, or are you against pride? You see, this is one way, for example, that this is how the debate is created. Another point, and this is more so a marketing thing, studies have shown that in the last 5 to 10 years, especially with Photoshop, Video Shop, etc., what's happening is a lot of things that we consider not to be allowed in our religion is being given preference. Like, for example, cross-dressing. Prophet said, women should dress like women, men should dress like men, according to their culture, right? A man shouldn't be dressing like a woman shouldn't be dressing, taking on characteristics that are specific to a gender, right? To the opposite gender. But what happens is, now we're seeing, like if you look at SNL, or you look at, Comedy Central, anything, it's very common. Even amongst Muslims, you'll see, a guy wearing a hijab and pretending to be like a mom or something, or an auntie, right? And what they've actually seen from some studies is that makeup, when they're marketing it to women, when it be for men, like for example, if they're doing some type of like new cologne, right? Or they're doing something that they're trying to sell, many times they'll have the men take on feminine features after like changing their face, because they know that will attract like women to buy more, because they found from their studies that the majority of people who buy stuff end up actually being women than men, right? And because of this, they alter the way people look, and therefore even just neurologically, if you look at an image and it's been created to look kind of like a woman, but it's a man, it does create some type of like influence, if you say, it might create some type of contradiction. This is just a point that I brought up, that to look at, for example, not only the way we talk, but the things that we look at. And in addition to that, another point, and this is a point that we find that's growing in the world, is the idea of sexual practices outside of established marriage, right? Nowadays, we know that the places that watch the most pornography are Muslim countries. The country with the highest levels of pornography are Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and other places where they try restricting internet, but people just end up doing this because the culture might not be as free as ours, for example. And what this leads to is, when you're looking at things that aren't actually marriage, and you're actually looking at things that they try promoting this fake sense of sensual desire and lust, etc., what happens is people start experimenting, and a lot of people actually do become sexually deviant. They're saying that one of the things that they've worked to legalize in many of the Scandinavian countries and Japan and other places is sex with animals, right? Or sex with and they say that's one of the growing trends in what people search for in pornography. Sex with a horse, or et cetera, like very, very vulgar things. A lot of things which might be very, very scary for us as Muslims. And these are, some discussion points for us to think about, that where does this deviancy come from? Does it come from going out and experimenting, etc.? Now, if you notice throughout the topic that I did, and I'm going to, conclude very quickly, I didn't go into so much of the halal and haram of homosexuality because we have, a respected scholar with us and someone we'll all learn from. What I rather wanted to do is give some discussion points for us to think about in terms of how do we frame this discussion before we actually get into the discussion of itself, right? Because the scholars have made it very clear that marriage in Islam specifically involves the dowry, the mahr, for example, financial support, in exchange for a very specific type of intercourse, which is vaginal intercourse, which is between a man and a woman, right? And if that penetration and that type of intercourse is not taking place, then it isn't marriage. You may be able to mimic marriage, and if you want to read more about this, there's an article I believe it's called Varsity Magazine by Jonathan Brown, who's an academic at Georgetown University. He goes into this in more detail, where he talks about that legally we're given a specific criterion for something to be considered a marriage. You may try mimicking it, but at the end of the day, we as Muslims define it this way according to mainstream scholars, according to the majority of scholars. And of course, there may be other opinions as well. So these are the points that I wanted to kind of share before we actually get into the topic, inshallah, which I'll be handing off to our respected scholar to speak about more, inshallah.
I would like Imam Shamsi to give his opinion, and then we can open up the floor to discussion and questions as well.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. I just wanted to take on the point that, what's your name again? Brother Arif? Brother Arif. On the point of why such things happen in our society. And I just wanted to give you one example. It's a long time ago, 3-4 years back. An Egyptian brother happened to be a limo driver in New York, called me. And he said, I have someone who wanted to learn Islam. So I sent him to the masjid. So he came to the mosque, happened to be a Caucasian man, tall, big, with muscles. But he came with a monk outfit, like Buddhist monk. So I can see his tattoos and all, even on his head. So I said, have a seat. What I can do for you? He said, I wanted to learn Islam. So I said to him, what is your religion? He said, I'm a Buddhist. Were you born Buddhist? He said, no, I was born Catholic, and then he moved to Protestant, and he ended up later on as a Buddhist. So I said, why you have this out? Are you a monk? He said, no. I just have this on because I wanted to meet an imam. In order to respect an imam, he possibly imagined that an imam should be with certain outfit, like my brother Arif here, with Arabic dress and turban and kind of such things. So I said to him, why you want to learn Islam? He said, as a Buddhist, every time that I feel being hungry, not physically, but spiritually, I enter into my room, close my eyes, meditating, and I feel satisfied. But the moment I left my room, I feel lost. I want a religion that can guide me in 24 hours, 7 days. And from the discussion that he had with the driver, he found that Islam possibly is that religion that he wants in his life. So I talk about how Islam guided us. In a few minutes, he cut me off. He said, do you think I can be a Muslim? So what do you mean? Everybody is welcome. And then I continue talking. And then he cut me off again. He said, are you really sure that I can be a Muslim? So I asked him, why you ask this question? He said, because I am a gay. So I was quiet for a moment. And I asked him this question. When did you feel this kind of feeling? This kind of attraction to the opposite, to the same sex? He said, when I began my business, what happened before that? He said, I used to have my girlfriend as American, usually. So I said to him, it means you change. He said, yes. So I said, listen, to become a Muslim is not only to change your religion, but basically to have a fundamental change in your life. My question is, do you want to change or not? And he said yes. After some time, of course, he was quiet, silent for a while, and he said yes. Alhamdulillah, he became a Muslim 2 days later at the United Nations. I'm a Khatib at the United Nations, and he came to the United Nations. He became Muslim at the UN. Some months later, some month of Ramadan, he called me. He said, Imam, thank you very much. I feel peace. 1 year later, I was in Hajj with Imam Muhammad Jovan, and I got a call in Mina. He said, Imam, this is me. I said, what happened? Are you in Hajj? He said, no, I am in Morocco. What are you doing? I'm going to marry. So my point here is that it is, as the brother Arab mentioned, that it's something that some people say that this is what is happening to me. It's about choice. But people choose, of course, on the basis of responsibility. And as Muslim, number one, as brother Arab mentioned at the beginning, number one, we have to understand ourselves, who we are, why we're here. And more importantly, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what Allah wants from us. Every single thing that we choose in life is about responsibility. But now we are living in this reality. This called LGBT issue has become not only LGBT, it's become an issue of human rights, an issue of freedom of choice, and so on and so forth. And the moment you openly say, no, we don't want that thing, they will say, no, Islam doesn't have respect for the human rights. Islam doesn't respect human rights. Islam doesn't have freedom of choice. So how to respond to such situations? And this is really challenging. So we come back to what I mentioned earlier at the end of the session. It is about a skill of communication, I think. Our stand is very clear. Our stand is very clear. Every single thing that is considered good or bad must be originated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the source for us to know what is right and what is wrong. Because if everybody wants to say, no, if according to me this is right, according to me this is wrong, then that's what the problem is. That's what the problem is. Because everybody has certain taste. And normally taste is being formed by the environment where you live in. For Indonesian, you like sambal terasi, right? Do you still like sambal terasi? Before you came to the United States, possibly you're never into any of these McDonald's. And you see the people eating McDonald's. What kind of food is that? But hopefully one day there should be halal McDonald's. And as Americans, you love that McDonald's. Because that's what the environment is. The environment shapes your taste. And if the environment will determine what is right and what is wrong, that's what the problem is. So what is the determination of the truth? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-haqqu min rabbik fala takunanna min al-mumtarin. Truth is only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not be doubtful. Whatever the people says about it, that's what the truth is all about. The challenge is how to communicate the truth. How to communicate the truth. Because as we know that Islam is being formulated, is being designed in such a way that looks like it's against all kind of human values. Undemocratic, against civilizations. I still remember about some rallies a few months ago. It's called Rally for Humanity. It looks like Islam is against humanity. Islam doesn't know rights of others. Islam doesn't respect one. All kind of things. And the moment we communicate Islam as some people do, people even will use those as a means to further pressure that Islam basically is not right for those who consider themselves civilized and educated. Okay? So I was asked once by CNN about this when I was in Imam at the 96th Street Mosque Islamic Center that I mentioned earlier. CNN says, if someone comes to you, happen to be gay, and want to pray in your mosque, do you accept him? I say, first of all, I don't have a right to ask anybody, are you gay or straight? I'm not standing at the door and ask everybody, are you gay or straight? And everybody's welcome here in the mosque to pray. And then he say, but if someone, tell you that he is a gay and he wanted to come to pray in your mosque, you welcome. I say, yes, of course. I would say, come and sit down in the front. In the front. Hopefully by listening to my lecture, to my khutbah, he could change. And then he continues. How about same-sex marriage? So that's the way in media, basically. They're hunting you. They're hunting you. And how to think about this? How to respond to this kind of questions? And my response, if not mistaken, was, listen. This is what Islam says. But let me just tell you, Islam respects, number one, freedom of choice. Even I am a Muslim not because of my parents. I am a Muslim because I choose to be Muslims. And of course, we believe that Allah guided us. I choose to be Muslim. It's based on my own choice. My parents did not force me to be Muslims. And you, if you are a Muslim, you can choose it. If you remain non-Muslim, you can choose it. وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. You choose to be mu'min or disbeliever, is up to you. It's based on responsibility. So the freedom of choice in Islam is highly respected. So if these people chose to follow this kind of, I disagree, but I don't have any right to force them to follow my opinions. This is the way we respond. Because again, in the United States of America, even Barack Obama basically was hesitate to approve same-sex marriage. Because of the pressure. Even this, Dick Cheney, right? Dick Cheney, Republican, is what happened to his own daughter. Finally he changed his words. It is so powerful. Hollywood people supported it. And imagine if media supported it, politicians supported it, who else is going to? And if the moment we say something otherwise, Islam is going to be blamed. And so, my point is, number one, being as Muslims, we know that the truth only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't come from what we decide. Okay? This is our determination. This is the limit that we have to know. Secondly, we know the truth. The challenge is how to communicate the truth. It is the skill of communication. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran, Khalaqa al-Insan, Allama al-Bayan. You do believe in the mercy of Allah, you do believe in your creations, you do believe in the Quran, but if you don't know how to communicate it, it might be a problem. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allama al-Bayan, communication is paramount important. So it's just, I think, an open remark from both of us, and we can just open the discussion.
All right, so does anyone have anything to say or ask? All right.
Okay, so I am in kind of the same situation as Imam Shamsi. One of my friends, she came up to me and she told me that one of her closest friends, he's a guy and he's always been interested in Islam. So she always, introduced him to the Quran and he always read the translation and he fell in love with it. But he's gay. And so he kept on asking her, he's like, can I convert to Islam if I'm gay, And she doesn't know how to answer that kind of question. So I know that you said that some people can change after they convert to Islam, but what happens if they don't? Like, is it bad for them to stay a Muslim?
There are two possibilities. Either remain non-Muslims or accept Islam and remain gay. Now in Islam there is what we call akhaf ad-darain, which one is the least harmful. It is being non-Muslims or being, let's say that he doesn't change, being gay. Which one is the least or less harmful for this particular person? And certainly he believes in Allah, he believes in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he believes in the Quran, but unfortunately due to his own weaknesses he remains gay. At the end of the day there must be responsibility. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. He always has mercy to those who have faith in Him. And so, in my own personal opinion, that one is the best. But, guide him. Open the door for him. Give him the optimism. Da'wah is to call. And when we say da'wah, it's like inviting someone, come into your dinner. But if you intimidate, how are you going to come and eat with you? Don't intimidate. Da'wah is always with compassion and love. And more importantly, it's about saving. Da'wah is not only even just to, so that people accept Islam. It's about saving our humanity at this moment. Imagine I don't know how many states in the United States already approve same-sex marriage. Out of 50 states. So around 20? All of them? Oh, because federal. Oh, because of, imagine this. So who is going to save our humanity if we don't do this da'wah? But this da'wah meant to save. It's a kind of salvation. When Christian friends, conveying, giving what they call good news to the people, we are not just giving good news to the people. We are saving people from the hell. And that's why giving dawah is truly very, very important on our shoulder, to continue carrying on our shoulder, saving them. But more importantly, don't forget that to call the people to Islam, you have to be very careful. I've seen some Muslims, mostly in the Muslim land, they are considered themselves du'at, callers. Basically, they are throwing people away from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of the methodology, because of the way they convey the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are threatening the people. And so da'wah is very important. And I gave you one example when I did the last session about someone who came and blamed Islam and blamed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a very small thing we do. We shake hands and smile, and he came. He learned Islam 6 months, and finally he became a Muslim. He became Muslim, alhamdulillah. So it's about how to convey it. So continue giving motivation, continue guiding him, and inshallah, you are not the one who guide him, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm sure that every heart is in the hands of Allah. He can change at any moment that He wants, in a way that He wants. Allah answer.
In addition to that, one thing I wanted to kind of speak about, which was kind of the underlying part, which had to do with the desires. One thing for us is that as a Muslim community, we might see homosexuality as a beast of its own, right? And if you look at even the program topics, the fact that LGBT is a topic on its own compared to many of the other perhaps sins that might be there, shows the importance of the topic. The fact that this topic was picked over other topics shows its importance. One thing that I wanted to share, and this is something that our teachers say as well, is that for those that have desires for the other gender, for the same gender, and they are Muslim, honestly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them something, and we should be very compassionate. Very, very compassionate. It's a very, very difficult situation, very difficult test that they're going through, right? And even for non-Muslims, they know that, coming out the closet for them, they know their family's going to go against them, they know their, people around them, there might be like rednecks or others that might try actually killing them, there might be people that, are very, very vocal against them, might throw stuff at them, etc., right? And for us, that people who grew up as Muslim, and perhaps, Allah, if they have any issues when they were younger, perhaps they didn't, but they had desires towards the same gender. In many ways, we have to look at this as having desires towards any other type of thing. For example, I might really, really crave alcohol if I'm, let's say I drink a lot, and then now that I'm Muslim, I still get those urges to drink, right? Or I have this big urge to gamble. Everyone in my family used to gamble. I love gambling, right? For me to stay away from that, in and of itself is amazing, right? And you'll be rewarded for that. And in Islam, your rewards are based on your effort, right? Even if you're reciting Quran, Rasulullah tells us that the one who recites Quran with difficulty gets double the reward, right? Double the reward. And there's two people sitting beside each other. Both of them recite for an hour. One guy walks away with 100 good deeds, another walks with 200 good deeds. Why? Because he worked with difficulty. So the first thing for us is that culturally, yes, it's been strange. As Imam Shamsi mentioned, even Hillary Clinton, up until just 2-3 years ago, was publicly against gay rights. She said that this is, I define marriage as between a man and a woman, right? But because of the political climate, etc., and as they say, we got enlightened and so on, or our views changed as we met more people, etc. Because the law of the land here is based on, what is, the popular opinion, for example. That's what they said. But for us, one thing as Americans that we also have is the agreement to disagree. And this is something that we should be clear about as Muslims. I have the right to share my opinion that I may not consider something permissible, which you may consider permissible. And what's amazing in Islam is that even in this land, in the earlier centuries, they've tried, for example, banning alcohol, right? They have prohibition, right? Because there's still a lot of Christians to this day that believe that drinking alcohol is, against Christianity. But were they able to? They weren't. As they said, that they used to just, make alcohol in their bathtub. So there was this big, black market where everybody would drink, but basically to drink privately, right? But you look at what happened in Islam, that as soon as the commandment came, at first Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, don't come to a prayer while you're drunk. and then that alcohol, there's more harm in it than good. And when the commandment finally came down that don't drink alcohol, even though many of the companions would drink it, they said that the streets of Medina were flowing with alcohol. Just all those gone. And the reason I bring this is that, as Imam Shamsi very eloquently said, that at the end of the day, it's all about whether or not you're embracing, whether or not you're accepting the different teachings, and understanding that if you do have these desires, that what you're going through is something I will never understand as a married person, right? As married to a woman. I will never understand the hardship that you have of feeling these desires but knowing you can't act on it. And all we can say is, for you to be patient on that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a very high rank in Jannah for your patience. Because you're going through something we can't understand. You know? What we can say is that this is what the religion is about. So this is some points I want to talk about in terms of desires, that a lot of us might have desires for other things as well. You know? And in our culture, unfortunately, because the idea of homosexuality was foreign at one time, we get scared of it and we treat it as if it's worse than shirk. We treat it as if it's worse than leaving the fold of Islam. And we tell people you cannot be gay and be a Muslim at the same time, right? But even the most conservative scholars that come from Saudi Arabia or other places, they say that if someone is Muslim but they happen to act on homosexuality, knowing that they shouldn't but they still act on it, we cannot take them outside of the fold of Islam. They're Muslim. And they're still your brother and sister that are going through some difficulty. And that's something that we should remember as when we speak about desires and we speak about the compassion towards those that go through these desires.
Okay, are there any other questions? Is this helpful?
So, from my understanding, that you're saying that being homosexual is a choice, right? What is a desire?
So was the question that is homosexuality, are we saying that it's a choice?
It's part of it, but yeah.
So I think I know that Imam Shamsi Ali mentioned choice, and I also mentioned the word choice, at least from my understanding, and Imam Shamsi can correct me as needed, inshallah. It is basically that when we say choice, we mean the choice of acting on that desire. Because unfortunately, the narrative in America right now is that I can't control myself, and I won't be able to be a happy person. I won't be able to be sufficient unless I have a married partner that I can go out in the streets and say, this is my husband, and so on and so forth. And it's not a choice, right? We are not, at least I'm not saying that desire is a choice. Like you were like, yes, I would like to have feelings for the same gender. No, I would not. I'm not saying that. What we're saying is that perhaps you may not be able to control that, but what we all have choice on is whether I'm going to take an action or not. Whether I can, leave this room right now or not. We always have this choice. That's the choice that we're talking about. In terms of desires, there is, as they talk about in biology and etc., that there's still controversy on this topic, but many say that people are born that way with this orientation, right? I'm not going into that orientation. What I'm talking about is your actual choice of what you're doing. Inshallah.
The word choice was mentioned because the American narratives basically understand in that way. If we resist it, they would say, Islam is against freedom of choice. So, and this was happening in the Muslim world. You don't have any freedom at all, including freedom of choice. You cannot choose your leaders. Okay, woman cannot choose anything. Woman cannot choose a future husband. They must be forced to marry. So it becomes a big deal in terms of choice, and that's why our response is that Islam respects choice, and that is to respond to the issue of choice. Because it's not the issue of gay. It's not the issue of homosexuality, lesbianism. It's the issue of choice here, because they wanted to make this as a jumping start to blame Islam on many other issues, human rights, freedom of choice, and so on and so forth. Okay? But let's just go back to the issue of gay in Islam. Is there anybody born gay? And let me just tell you this before the Western people talk about gay issue. And I don't know if this word khuntha in the Arabic language is equivalent to gay. Muslim scholars have discussed about it. Because this involves to imamah. Can this kind of person be an imam? How is it about inheritance? Because in Islam, supposedly male have one and woman have half because of the responsibilities, of course. And so how we're going to distribute the inheritance? So the issue had been discussed by our scholars for a long time before anybody talked about it. But what is the definition of khuntha? Khuntha, it's called khuntha in the terminology of fiqh in Islam. Khuntha means those who were born genetically split, or possibly genetically wrong. This is XY, right? XY, right? But some others say no. Khuntha means someone who is born, but his sexuality is not known. Okay. So what Islam says about this type of people? Those days, there's only one answer, and it is leave celibacy. Okay, celibacy. Not just resist your desire and live your life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But nowadays, it might be so difficult because of the environment, everything is open. So there is a possibility, and it's been discussed by the scholars in Egypt, in Kuwait, and some other Muslim countries, including in Iran, except Saudi Arabia, resisted this. There is the possibility of changing, how you call it, surgery, something? Like a surgery?
Like a sex change?
Sexual, yeah. So Islam, according to some fatwas, including that come from Egypt, that it is possible. And do you know, correct me if I'm wrong, that the largest operations, sexual operations, happen to be one of the Muslim countries, and that is in Iran. Do you know why? Because the punishment is so harsh in Iran. And that is capital punishment. And so many chose to change their sexuality. Okay? So my point is that the issue of choice is not about either we choose to be gay or not. It is the issue of desire, and desire is being formed by the environment, the society we live in. Imagine if you go to New York on Friday evening, go to East Village or West Village. You see thousands of people, they consider themselves gays. Do you think all these born gays? Thousands. So out of 8 million people in New York, so like 3,000, 4,000 are gays. I mean, born gays, natural gays. It doesn't come to my comprehension. And so this is about, something that is people are doing it against the natural thing in their life. It's against nature. And I think after thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must think about who we are. What is rational. Just use your rational judgment. I mean, something natural in your life. What is natural in life? I don't think animals will do that. How come humans can do that? And so my point is that if people say that this is not, we are born in that way, I mean, it's just difficult to accept. Rational.